I want to demystify some of the ideas around suicide. I want to make it a little simpler in people's minds so that they can have a better grasp of what they're working with. Obviously, I'm not giving out treatment, et cetera, over the online, but for the general lay person, so they have a better understanding of what that is going on or what happened. Why did this happen to someone that I dearly love? And so it could give them some answers that are useful answers for them.
Hey guys, welcome back to the TPM show. Today I have a very, very special guest with me. I have Sean Stiller. Now, Sean has been a psychotherapist for the last 16 years, working with thousands of clients and couples to help them with common mental health problems like depression, anger, anxiety, habits and addictions, and of course, relationships. He's worked in both inpatient and outpatient settings and has worked with military members and their families as well. Sean even has a workbook that will be published in late March called How to Break Through Any Emotional and Behavioral Challenge So You Can Live a Happy Life. I mean, who doesn't want that, right? At the end of the day. Sean currently has a private practice called Coastal Cognitive Behavior Therapy, which specializes in cognitive behavioral therapy. And so if you're interested in talking more or learning more about Sean, we'll make sure to put his information down below. But you can go to his website at coastalcbt, that's Charlie BakerTom.com, and he works with people both in person and not. Sean, thanks for being here.
Hi. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. So you came highly recommended by one of our coaches, and you and I had a great conversation last time. And this comes off of, the unfortunate tragic loss of one of the men that has been through the program previously. Great gentleman who unfortunately took his own life and really rocked the TPM movement or community that we have here internally, and also brought up the conversation point. And I think it's the CDC, last time I checked, is suicide being the number 2 cause of death for men, 14, I think it's to 46 or somewhere in that range, Sean, and number 1 for men in the UK. It's just never talked about.
Yeah, it's actually also been increasing over the last decade or so. So it's been more prevalent. I know in the United States, it's went up about 20% over the last decade. So just to add even more to what you're saying, Doug, unfortunately, it has been increasing. And the most unfortunate part of it is that it's preventable and it's very treatable. You might be surprised when we get into our discussion about that, about how treatable it really actually is. And that's maybe the saddest part of it, but also the most hopeful part of it is that it can be prevented.
Yeah, and I really appreciate men like you bringing this to light, right? Again, we hear about heart disease. We hear about, stroke and high stress and all of these killers, but those are like number 3, 4, and 5. Not even 1 and 2. And I know when we talked off air, so to speak, or on our previous conversation, you've had direct impact in this area in your practice.
Yeah, it's been a great privilege to be able to, over those 16 years that we talked about, help individuals that come in with suicidal problems, suicidal behavior, suicidal thoughts. And to be able to see them from the point where they come in, Doug, where they're really on the bottom of bottoms. And it doesn't matter what your background is. It doesn't matter your color, demographics, et cetera. Everybody's susceptible to this. And the great privilege is being able to take them from that point and to be able to go through that process and to be able to see them overcome that. And it's one of my great joys and one of the things that really give me a lot of fulfillment, unbelievable amount of fulfillment, and be able to see them come out. But it can be a very scary process, in the beginning. And because sometimes there's life and death that we're talking about here, obviously. So, but there's a lot to get into about the specifics of those things. And And I want to. Part of the thing I was hoping to really impress upon with your audience is that I want to demystify some of the ideas around suicide. I want to make it a little simpler in people's minds so that they can have a better grasp of what they're working with. Obviously, I'm not giving out treatment, et cetera, over the online, but for the general layperson, so they have a better understanding of what that is going on or what happened. Why did this happen to someone that I dearly love? And so it could give them some answers that are useful answers for them.
Yeah, I think that's really important what you bring up. When I think about myself in my, let's just say my 20s or even early 30s, I wouldn't have known that it was this common, number one. Number two, there is that stigma that I want to demystify for some of the men. And some of you guys listening to this right now, whether you're in the car or you're on the treadmill or whatever you're doing at this moment, you may think, hey, this doesn't apply to me, right? I'm not having suicidal thoughts. But when you look at the statistics, chances are you know somebody that is. And Sean, for me, in the position I'm in, working with thousands upon thousands of men at this point, when I gained the men's trust and their confidentiality, and I asked that question, how many of you guys have considered taking your own life? The number of hands that go up is staggering, right? And I just want the men out there that are listening to this to know, first and foremost, before we begin, one, you're not alone. Two, if you are going through this process, obviously love for you to listen to this podcast, but call somebody immediately, right, guys? There's a lot of men like Sean or myself. I'm not an expert, but I'll pick up the phone, right? And just know that you're not alone out there. There's tons of hotlines to call. That's not what we're trying to achieve with this podcast and this episode. We just really want to bring awareness with experts like Sean coming on. But guys, know that you're not alone, right? There's a lot more men out there suffering in silence. And if you're like me and one of those guys that hasn't considered suicide, for me, it's just a good remembrance to know I don't know what the other person next to me is walking through right now. And it's just a good consideration. So Sean, when you're working with, an individual or a client that's coming in, what are some of the telltale signs, or how does an individual get to this point?
The signs I think that are most common are going to be things that you probably know about, Doug, and maybe your audience does. Obviously, the biggest sign is someone will talk about death. Mm-hmm. Healthy individuals. Maybe it's a healthy, like you were mentioning, a 40-year-old or 35-year-old or something or whatever. And they're just focused on death. They're talking about it. What we know about people who actually do commit suicide is that they tell people generally, right? So it's not usually hidden. Now, there's a point in time where, unfortunately, where it gets really dangerous, where they start hiding it. But initially, they want help. They want to get relief. Oftentimes, the act of suicide itself is to get relief. So obviously, one of the big signs is that they will tell us. They'll tell a friend, they'll tell a pastor, they'll tell certainly a therapist, maybe a loved one like a spouse, etc. So we want to take that seriously. The other things that you might notice too is some things such as socially withdrawing. Maybe this person was more extroverted and they had a lot of friends and they spent a lot of time socially. Now they're withdrawing. They're not doing that as much. They're obviously going to be depressed more often than not. They're going to be depressed. There's other signs, things like their energy level and concentration. Now, one of these things in and of itself is not going to be determinative, obviously, that this person's at a high risk. So if you've had a bad day and you're low energy, it doesn't mean that you're suicidal or your friend is suicidal. I don't want to give that impression, but certainly when people are talking about it and they're very depressed, hopelessness is one of the key features. And I want to go maybe later on into more depth about why that is. But this sense of hopelessness is really impactful, because I believe that that's at the heart, or one of the hearts. There's a couple of things that really, once we grasp a couple of different ideas, I think it's going to, again, demystify it, make it a little bit simpler and more concrete. But, we could get into that if we want to, but I would also see how you want to take the conversation there, Doug.
Yeah, and just so the guys know, I told Sean, I go, hey, man, this is going to be like jazz. We don't need to prep for this conversation. We're just going to have it. And Sean happens to be an amazing guitar player and was in jazz band. So just as an aside, I like to bring some humanity to it. So, what's interesting when I'm listening to you talking about, we just had an event in Breckenridge, and I had about 10 men come up to me privately and say, hey, I just want to thank you and your team. You guys saved my life. And you talk about hopelessness. Now, we work with men usually on two different paths. The first one is the one we talk about the most on this show is men are looking to save their marriages, right? Without sacrificing their business or themselves. And the second group of guys are just a little lost and stuck. Like, hey, what's the next step in life, if you would? And I think what happens there, Sean, is for a lot of these men, like the men that came up to me, now it's not lost on me the gravity of that comment. Hey, you saved my life. It touches me each and every time to my core when a man shares that with me. Again, I don't take it lightly. I have a whole team behind me. But what I wonder is, when your primary relationship isn't working, right? As men, we tend to think we're not enough, we're not good enough, we're failures or what have you, even though these men are very successful in a lot of areas. I would imagine that would also bring in hopelessness, like, it's not working, it's not worth it. So can you talk to me a little bit about this hopelessness and how men get there or people get there and what they can do about it?
I'm really excited to tell you a couple ideas that can really transform your thinking on not just suicidal behavior, but life even. I know that sounds like a hyperbole, and it is not. I'm really excited to talk about this because it's such a somber discussion. It's about suicide, but it is obviously, and my heart goes out to anybody who suffered loss of a loved one. Yet I also want to bring it back to how this matters to us all. Actually, what happens is a couple things. Number one, we have, as a human being, we have these desires. Let's call them wants. I want to make more money. I want to do better with my children as parent. I want to have a better relationship with my spouse, et cetera, et cetera. And I want to do better with my physical fitness. I want to lose weight, et cetera. So we have these strong wants or goals, if you will. And what we do is we will sometimes turn those into absolute needs. And when I mean absolute needs, they're the emotional equivalent to air, food, and water. And when that happens, when we confuse our needs with our wants, or we upgrade those wants to a complete need, it's very easy to do that as human beings. Yeah. But it's when we don't actually attain the need, when we don't get the thing, we don't reach the goal, we don't get the promotion at work, we don't get the girl, the relationship doesn't work out, something like that. When that happens, that's when that hopelessness feature, and that's the second thing I want to talk about. Again, one is confusing needs with wants. Two is that hopelessness aspect that we talked about. When that happens, Doug, then we're really in the danger zone, because this is something that I just don't really want really bad. I need it, like the emotional equivalent to air, food, and water. And I could give you anecdotes and examples of this, actually. But number two, I'm hopeless and I can't get it. Now we're in the danger zone right now. Mm-hmm. Because if it's strong enough and they're in enough pain, people then will oftentimes look at an option such as suicide in order to be able to get out of that pain because of the hopelessness. The business had to work out. It must work out. I need it to work out. I must have my relationship work out. It needs to work out. And you can hear it in my clients and friends and things like that in the way that they speak about these things. And they're not just joking or, saying it flippantly. They're being honest. But I'm also hopeless and there's nothing I can do to get it. And my life is in shambles. And that's where the misery tends to come in. But now that we know those two things, we can start to deal with it in a way where, is it truly hopeless? No, it's not truly hopeless. But the hardest thing to do as a clinician or as a friend or anybody else is getting them to the point to where the hopelessness turns into hopefulness. And we could talk more about that as you desire. So those are the two things I think that are going on. That's really important to understand. Again, we confuse that need, that want, and we upgrade it to an absolute need. Two, we're hopeless in getting that need. And that's where the problem lies, but that's also where the answer lies.
Yeah, I love this. I haven't thought of it that way before. So when I'm looking at the guys that I've worked with and talked to, the two things that come up to me when you say that is, the guys that we work with are high achievers, right? They're these men that have built big businesses or are coming in and, right, they want to achieve more. So they set a goal, they crush the goal, they spend 5 minutes celebrating, and they set a new goal, right, which creates a gap. Right now, there's a gap between where they are and where they want to be. And when I hear the hopelessness, what I'm hearing you talk about is an identity play. They've made it their identity to have this need, and we'll do anything to match our identity or what our perceived identity is.
Absolutely, that's really fascinating. The identity is oftentimes, I am a businessman. Mm-hmm. I am a good father. I am a good lover. I am a good partner. But the thing is starting to fall apart on us. And when that happens, that's when we have problems, right? That's when we start to have issues on it. So,
yeah, talk to me a little bit more about, how we go from hopelessness to hopefulness. I really like that kind of transition.
I'm going to say something that might seem a little odd or controversial, but I think that when you really think about it, I think most people will understand. All hopelessness by its nature is irrational. Okay. The problem with hopelessness is by its nature, it misses the fact that we just don't know. I'm hopeless. I've gone through it. Let's say someone's going through a divorce, right? Very typical situation where someone might actually think in suicidal terms. And I'm hopeless to ever find love ever again. I'm hopeless to ever find someone ever again. I'm defective as a human being. There's something wrong in my core. Okay. And the problem with the hopeless thinking, which is I'll never find love again, no one will ever love me or something like that, is how do you know that? Mm-hmm. We don't. We don't have a crystal ball. In cognitive behavioral therapy is the one I'm trained in, as you might have noticed from my practice, coastal cognitive behavioral therapy. We're really trained in the idea that it's our thinking that's causing the problems in our emotions. If we have a dysfunctional behavior or a dysfunctional emotion, it's our thinking, right? And a great quote, I love to quote, is Shakespeare. Things are neither good or bad, but thinking makes it so.
Yes.
Right. So it's our thinking. So we start to really get into what is this individual thinking? This is one of the best parts of being a psychotherapist is I get the great privilege of hearing the most insecure, most intimate, most personal thoughts that a human being can be. And to me, that's a great honor and a great privilege. And they will say things like that. Look, my life is in shambles. I can't make the business work anymore. My child won't talk to me anymore, my kid, etc. And it's hopeless. I've tried everything. Everything, but there's one other thing that we can do, and they miss that. We miss it, and it's the biggest con game that we give to ourselves, right? I've been there. We've all been there at some point, but we kind of, all right, let's step out of the hypnosis for a second here, the self-hypnosis, and let's get the thing right. The truth is that there's always another book. There's always another person that we can talk to. There's always another program. There's always another therapist. There's always something else we can do. We're just not aware of. And here's another thing I'm going to say about hopelessness that's really helpful to all of us. To be hopeless is one of the most arrogant things, most arrogant perspectives that a human can have. Well, what is that? Yeah. You're saying that you know 100% that it can't be, done. And that's just simply not true. We don't know that. And I could go deeper with this, but today's age, we got the ability. I'm not going to go down that road yet, but the bottom line is in order to help person overcome hopelessness, we have to be able to use good old fashioned logic, rationality, and take a look at, is this thinking, is it really truly logical? Is it truly based in fact? And like I said before, all hopelessness by its nature is irrational.
And it makes complete sense when you say it that way. We can't predict the future. Nobody can. And so people and we look at this, the topic of suicidal behavior or thoughts anyway. Maybe suicidal thoughts is a better way of saying it. What that individual is doing is saying, hey, look, I know what's going to happen, right? I can predict all of the future rather than staying in the present.
Right. And it will never work out for me. The thing that I feel like I absolutely need, not just want, will never come to be. And I know because I've tried everything. No, you haven't. We haven't tried everything. There's always another thing. So when someone's very, very at that point where they're considering suicide, one of the things that we really want to focus in on as clinicians or therapists or great friends is we want to be able to help them understand that there is hope, right? And that's one big part of it. We just don't know. Would you be willing to live a little bit longer to see if another try at it, doing something different would work? And and if they do, they have a chance with it.
Are there ever times, Sean, when you ask that question that someone says, no, I'm not willing to give it another shot? Or do you?
Yeah. And that's where we have to get a few more interventions involved. Right. And that's where someone might need extra help, like, hospitalization or something like that. But, the other thing to consider here is a lot of times we talked about the need, like people make this thing a need. And by the way, I love the fact that you were talking about some of the folks that you work with, they're higher achievers. And there's a delicate balance. We should talk about that a little bit because it really spurred on something in my mind.
Let's do it.
There's a delicate balance between really needing to achieve something versus having that strong want. That strong want, I know this is subtle words that we're using, but you feel it in your body when you want something or need something. What I think your folks are doing and they're great at is they overcome a lot of obstacles to get to that point. I mean, they have a long-term goal, right? And if there's a wall, we'll climb over the sucker. If there's something there, we'll dig a hole, we'll get underneath it, we'll go around it, we'll figure out a way to do that. So they figure out how to get to the end result eventually. In spirit, at very least. It may not be the exact thing that they wanted, but it's something that they were searching for. And they're able to get over those obstacles. What I'm talking about is a lot of times people will confuse the means by which to achieve a goal that they have in their life with the actual goal. What am I talking about? Let's say you have a wheel, like on your bicycle wheel, where it has spokes coming out of the hub, right? So you have this wheel with maybe, 30 spokes coming out of the hub of the wheel. Let's imagine that the hub is the goal, the thing that the person really wants in their life. It could be a financial goal, a physical goal, a relational goal, those things. And then let's say that the person says, this is the way I need to have this goal, this thing. Let's say it's, I need my business to be successful. Well, that might be just one spoke that comes to the hub. And what they do is they start to say, well, I need this thing in order to be happy. And if I don't get it, I can't be happy. I'll be miserable without it. What I want people to understand is, no, you're not really wanting to earn that money. You're not really wanting this particular thing. The thing won't make us happy. It's what it represents. And usually it's the basic things that we all know, Doug. It's love. We want to feel love. We want to feel connected. We want to feel strong and significant. As men, of course, we want to feel strong and significant. We want to have challenge. Yes, challenge in our life. We don't want to have stuff that's totally easy all the time. We want to have basic things like we want to have certainty that things are going to work out well in our life and stability. I had a dear friend of mine a couple of years ago. He called me on the phone and he told me about his brother. And his brother had recently committed suicide, sad to say. And we kind of talked it over. And in listening to him, this is a good anecdote of how this kind of works out in real life. I said, tell me about your brother. What had happened? And he was wanting to talk about it. So I listened. He goes, he was in medical school. He got through medical school and he was getting ready to go into his residency to be a surgeon. Now, did he want to be a surgeon or did he need to be a surgeon? No, he absolutely, air, food, and water. I need to be a surgeon. Okay. And guess what? He comes down with this condition where he has this seizure that won't allow his hand to stop shaking it periodically at times. As you could tell what happened, he couldn't get elected into the residency. And because of that, then he didn't have a chance to become what he actually felt like he needed to become. And as a result, it was just a matter of time before he committed suicide. Nobody that I was aware of, was working with him or anything. Is something that I think he might have kept to himself. But the saddest part of it is that he thought that there was one spoke to that hub of the wheel for him to find that happiness, for that love, to feel significant, to feel important in this world. It wasn't that spoke. There's many other spokes by which to achieve the goal of living as a happy and healthy human being. You're not trying to be a surgeon if I could get him in the office, right? Eventually. It's like, do you really think that that's the only way by which that you can be happy is to be a surgeon? Why did you want to become a surgeon? Well, because, I wanted to be important. I wanted to do great things. I wanted to help people. I wanted to contribute, et cetera, et cetera. Yes. Are there other ways by which you may be able to achieve those goals? And then the answer is, well, I guess so. Are there other ways that other people achieve those goals in their life? I guess so. We're starting to change thinking. And that's what happens. And this goes beyond suicidal thinking. It goes on to all of our lives because there's that great adage, God's delays are not God's denials. God closes one door and he opens up another door, and I think that's what's happening here. So I really want to impress upon people that idea that, that's not the thing that you think is going to make you happy. It's something bigger that you're striving for. There's many ways by which to get to that point. And that's the sort of the idea I wanted to talk about.
I love that. And I shared with you, so I'm at the TPM Ranch and we do events here and we're doing our flagship experiential event. We call it the Alpha Reset. We call it the Alpha Reset. It's kind of like Fight Club, and the guys don't tell other men about what happens, but they share their end result, right? And 100% of the men would say it's, life-changing. And that's not hyperbole because we do anonymous, if we have for 7 years, anonymous reviews of our programs. But the reason I bring this up is, to me, if someone asks me, okay, so what is this event really? Like, what do I get out of it? And the most common thing that men say is they find themselves for most likely the first time, or they re-find themselves again. And the way I look at that, Sean, is, again, going back to identity, when I'm hearing you talk about the surgeon, is that really his dream, or is somebody else put all of that upon him? And now he's wearing, I need to be a surgeon, like a suit. And society says, if you're going to be a physician, then, that's crap. Surgeons are the best, or whatever else has been put upon him. This event, as an example, we both know somebody that's here attending this event. That strips that all away again. And that's where men start to go, oh, I'm hopeful because I have a clear slate at which to live my life. And it sounds like you're saying something very similar of like, hey, there's many paths, one destination, but many paths to that destination.
Yeah, you said it much better than I did, Doug. That's exactly what I'm trying to say. And you're right about the identity. I know we got cut off technically, but the identity is huge. Whenever I hear somebody say "I am,"
Yeah.
be careful how we phrase the word "I am."
Yeah.
You know,
Two most powerful words, right?
yeah, that's right. Now we're getting to the very essence of what identity is.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, if the identity of the gentleman I was talking about, my friend's brother, was "I am a surgeon." That's right. Now we're getting into that territory. No, you're a human being.
Yeah.
That's what you are. Fallible and as imperfect as you are, as I am, and as all of us are. That's what we are. Fallible human beings,
Yes.
Imperfect human beings. That's what we truly are. And that's one of the most beautiful things that we can become to understand about who we actually are, from my perspective.
Hey guys, sorry to interrupt this episode, but the reality is if you are watching or listening to this right now, then you are looking to better yourself. And I applaud you. You're one of my people. And I want to give you the opportunity of taking massive action. So if you haven't joined the activation method yet, it's our flagship program. Do what thousands of other businessmen just like you have done and take action. Be one of the 1%ers that actually does the work and takes action. There'll be a link in the description that'll take you right to a page that'll just give you more information. There is no obligation. Just go check it out and see if it's a good fit for you. All right, let's get back to this episode.
We can strip off all the ideas. Like you said, yeah, it could have been given to him by somebody from, I don't know, a father who thought that surgeons are the greatest ever or something like that. Who the hell knows where we get these ideas from?
Yep.
It doesn't much matter. At a certain point, we have these ideas. But sometimes these ideas can cause immense misery in our lives. And once we can rid ourselves of those things, where we can have ideas that are more empowering, beliefs that are going to be useful in our life, push us toward a greater goal and help us, then we're going to have something that's going to be more useful for us. So I'd love to know more about your events. They seem so cool.
I'll tell you about them off
Life
air.
altering. Yeah.
They are, I mean, it's the reason I do this work. They are life changing. Again, we had 46 men in Breckenridge for an event. This event here is much smaller because we can guarantee the result. But one of the things that I talk about to the men is here I have my iPhone with me, and I update the iPhone software a few times a year. I don't know how many times updates come out, but when there's an updated for a software, I update the software. And I always ask the men, when's the last time you updated your software, your belief systems and the things? Because I hear it all the time, and I look at myself, right? A lot of guys are like, well, I'm never going to do what my dad did. The next thing you know, you're in your 40s looking in the mirror going, wait a minute, my mannerisms are the same. When did this happen? And also talking to the guys, and this we'll tie this into the guys having suicidal thoughts, but I hear often when men say, I am this or I am that, or any of these old adages, hey, money doesn't grow on trees, any of these things that I look at as that have been programmed, I ask, where did you learn that? And when men can figure it out where they learned it from, it's usually hey, I used to hear my mom say that around the house, or my dad did that. Surgeons, he may have made one comment like, oh, Frank's a surgeon. He's an amazing guy. Not meaning that your kid has to be a surgeon, but from a child's perspective, right? Still a brain forming thinks, in order for my dad to think I'm amazing, I must be a surgeon. Otherwise, I won't gain my dad's love.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. I'm still trying to get the love from my father then. Yeah. In a situation like that. I still want that approval, and that's the blueprint of my mind. It's mapped out. That's how I can get that approval. That's how I can feel significant. That's how I can feel, loved, is by being a surgeon. And updating the software. Yeah, I was wondering where you're going with that. I was like, where's he going with the software? I guess it's an analogy. Okay, yes, an analogy. That's totally right. Yeah, it's those belief systems that are they useful for us? Are they helpful for us? So you help the guys with that then.
Oh yeah, I mean, myself, we have a team of coaches, But when I think about this topic of suicidal thoughts, right? So what you had mentioned, I would love to talk a little bit more about maybe depression and how, how that ties in with hopelessness, because I can see corollaries. But at the same time, if I'm depressed or having suicidal thoughts, I've made something mean something else, right? I've attached meaning to an outcome or to my current existence. And I hear this also a lot from the guys, this kind of idea of like, they'll be better off without me. And they've come to that point where, hey, they don't want me around. I cause too many problems or, whatever it may be. They just don't want me around. What do you do, Sean, when you run into somebody making comments like that?
I say, let's get scientific. You claim that that you're a burden to these individuals, and have they told you that? Now, hopefully, Doug, hopefully they haven't said to, actually, you are a big burden to us. You're a big problem. We'd rather have you not be around, et cetera, et cetera. Hopefully that's not been the case. Assuming that isn't, do some research in it. Let's see how much of a burden you actually are. Have you talked to your wife and asked her what she thinks of you? Are you of value to her? How about your children, depending on their age level and understanding, et cetera? What are they going to say? And they might actually be surprised because, again, the big con game here is our thoughts sometimes. We can sometimes be our own biggest cons.
Yes.
And we're telling ourselves a bunch of distortions and lies. And let's get the actual facts. And so what I recommend to my clients, if they're in a position to do so, is to check and to do a little research in the matter. And of course, what they normally find out is the opposite from being a burden. They're a value to the people that are most important in their lives. But that's the insidious nature of what we're dealing with, because yes, I'm glad you brought it up. They'll oftentimes be saying, oh, I'm a burden for these people, or I'm a burden on my family. And they believe it 100%. Mm-hmm. As much as 1 + 1 = 2, they will tell you that it's absolutely true that I am a burden. And that's where it's dangerous. But I want to open the door for uncertainty to be able to show them that let's take a look at what the facts actually are. And when they do that, then they generally find out that that's just not the case. Yeah, and it can be eye-opening. And something as simple as that can be eye-opening, and then the thoughts and ideas of suicide are no longer necessary oftentimes, because what oftentimes deters people from suicidal behavior, as you can imagine, are things like family. I've had a rough go. I've got all this chronic back pain or something, and I can't live with this anymore, or my love life is terrible. I'm alone, etc. But I can't do it because of my mom.
Yeah.
Or I can't do it because I got employees, or I've got coworkers that love me, or something like that. I can't do it because of them. But if they think that they're a burden to those things that are natural deterrents, oftentimes to suicide, all right, now we're in a bad place again. But it's the big lie that we tell ourselves.
Wow. Okay. I can definitely see that. One thing that comes up for me, I've personally just never had suicidal thoughts. So when I'm always put my kind of curiosity hat on when someone shares with me that they previously were either suicidal or had them. And I'd love to get your take on this. One guy that scared me because just not having them is he said, well, Doug, I didn't have them either, but then I was going through a really, really rough period, work, home life. They all kind of came to a confluence, if you will. And I was driving down the highway, and just next thing you know, I felt like something took over, and now I'm going 120 miles an hour down the wrong way on the road. And have you heard of that happening? He felt like he kind of blacked out, if you will, and then snapped out of it. Like he was maybe just too much pressure is what it sounded like to me.
Yeah, that's a real unique case.
Okay.
From my perspective. I would be more inclined I'd be interested to find out more about his typical blueprint his software, as you call it. I like that. From the last week or two before that happening, and did you have an intention to harm yourself? Because one thing we want to differentiate between is sort of self-harm behavior, but it's non-suicidal, and actual suicidal behavior, just as a kind of a technical thing here, but an important distinction. Non-suicidal or self-harming behavior might be someone cutting or driving fast or drinking too much alcohol, etc. But they don't have the intention, and that's the key distinction, of actually killing themselves. And so we put those into two different categories for good reason. They can both be lethal, unfortunately. But it makes me wonder too, if maybe that person wasn't suicidal, but that they were just trying to get some kind of drive from it, or some impulse, novelty, or some thrill, or something like that.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Yeah. It was unusual for me as well. Let's backtrack here a second and talk about that link of depression, if we can, and hopelessness, because I think that's something that would be unique to drive home for these guys that may be listening. One, feeling depressed or hopeless in their marriage, their relationships, business perhaps isn't working out. How does somebody transcend that? I'll use that word. And two is, at what point should someone know, yep, I need to call Sean, or someone like Sean, and sit down with him and have a conversation?
We should talk a little bit about depression.
Okay.
And what really fosters that. That's another one we can demystify quite a bit, I think. What is it? Again, if you look in the book, it's going to tell you things like, the person's going to have sleep difficulty, low interest in activities that normally bring them interest, low energy, concentration problems, appetite issues, etc. And they're going to feel depressed, obviously, too. I basically gave you the whole DSM-5, symptoms. So if you're interested in that, that's not really the thing, though. What it really is, from a clinical perspective, where we can actually treat it, is when someone's feeling really low or depressed for an extended period of time, it's usually based on that interesting thing that you brought up earlier about the gap. So you have a position where you want to be, you have a goal, I think, and maybe I might be, tell me if I'm misrepresenting it. But then also there's a big gap. The wider the gap it is where you actually are, I'm using my hands here as a graphic, so if you're in the road or whatever, you're not going to be able, but we have the goal of what we want and then where we actually are. The bigger the gap between those two things, the more distress that we're going to have, the more discomfort that we're going to have. And actually, it's useful. If you want to achieve goals, you need to be able to honor that feeling of frustration even, or things like that. And it can be very useful emotions, because it's like, I'm going to do better, etc. But as that gap becomes bigger and bigger, sometimes people start to get depressed. And what they will do is they will say comments to themselves like this, or to others. I should be let's say it's a adolescent. I should be on the basketball team. I should have made the basketball team. I'm a basketball player, identity too. Yep. And I should make the basketball team. I got cut. Right? And now the person has such a huge gap there that they start to say, well, I should have made the basketball team. And then what comes from that? A lot of times people swing so far over, and I'm worthless.
Yeah.
And I'm not good enough. Mm-hmm. Those I hear in my ears as a clinician. Ding, 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 ding. I can help this person. It gets exciting, because now at that point, we know that, again, this is a big con game. This person's conning themselves, and they're believing their own lies about it, and we can start to help with it. But when we start to say those messages, obviously we start to get depressed, because someone who says that they're actually worthless or they're not good enough, what would they do in their lives? Not much at all.
Yeah.
That's when you start sitting, the couch is the depression's best friend. You know, it's like, what the hell? It's no use anyway. You know, I might as well watch another Netflix special or something like that. I'm not going to make the basketball team anyway. You know, it's not going to work out anyway. You know, I'm no good at this stuff anyway. So that's what is usually happening, is from a cognitive perspective, people are telling them that, hey, I should be at this level, or I should be doing this, or I should be this identity. And they're so far away from it, then they go and they say, well, I guess that must mean I'm worthless, or I'm not good enough as a human being. There must be something, you know, people come out of relationships. There must be something. One of the biggest fears is there's something defaulty. There's something wrong with my inner being that gets me to this place. Like, this has been the third relationship that's gone wrong, you know, and my very being is defective. And that's why, you know, it's going to happen. So somebody gets really, really depressed with that. And then how do we transcend it? Obviously, we want to look at, are these thoughts really true? Are they based in fact? What's the evidence to support this idea that you're defective to your core, for example, and you can't be in another relationship and you can't find love in your life? Let's take a look at this. And I become the prosecuting attorney a lot of times, where I am going to break that thing down. It's up on the witness stand. I was on the debate team for 4 years when I was in high school, so bear with me. It's like, I've had many people say in my life, you know what, I would start to argue with them or something like that. You know, you should have been an attorney. And usually they're not being nice about it. They're usually saying, please shut up and stop arguing with me all the time. I get this from my family, even, God bless them. But I use that skill to help my clients, because they're there for a reason. They want to get help. They want to change it too, right? And once they understand they're thinking, their software that needs to be updated, great analogy. We can change software. We can do something with that. Now we start to get into breaking it down and saying, is it really true? Is it based in fact? Is there the evidence to support this? Is this really logical, et cetera? And one of the cool things in my work and my training and my workbook is I list 17 different mental mistakes that human beings that are very common to people, called the common mental mistakes. And for example, one of them is irrational labeling, like we talked about before. You know, I am no good, or I'm fat, or I'm worthless. That's a complete overgeneralization. You're of course not. There's plenty of things that you do well. Or let's say all or none thinking is another one of these common mental mistakes. You know, this is good for dieting, right? I'm doing great for 7 days straight on my diet. I'm eating like whole foods, you know, no chips, no any of that stuff. And then I eat a couple chips from the bag because they offer it. And now I'm like, oh, I screwed up my whole damn diet. All or none thinking, right?
Might as well eat pizza now.
Pizza's my favorite too. It's like, but it's like, oh, the hell with it. Now, you know, I'm off my diet. It's, you know, screw it, you know, that kind of stuff. But what I help my clients understand is I teach them these things, and I have them read about it in my workbook. I have worksheets on it because I want them to be mindful of what they are, so they can point out in themselves without a therapist being around. I want them to be the best therapist that they can be. Without me, I'm trying to push myself out of a job. Terrible business model. But anyway, getting back to transcending the depression, it gets back to, again, being able to help people understand how to break down their thinking, to be aware of it, and to see is it empowering? Is it disempowering? Is it useful? Is it even based in fact at all? And a lot of times we find out, no, it's just not. It's just not helpful or useful or even true.
Yeah, I do a similar exercise when I'm coaching men, especially one-on-one, is, you know, in a court of law, is this an undeniable fact? You know, and of course, they're usually like, you know, no, you know, they get all upset. Why are you taking away my story? You know, kind of attitude. And because a lot of us, we hold on to our stories like a little blankie, like a kid holds on to a favorite stuffed animal or something. We don't want to let it go. And guys and women, I used to coach women CEOs a long time ago. as well. They hold on to that story about who they are or what's happening in their lives and a story about the past, and they do not want to let it go because it's so tied into their identity that it scares them. It causes fear within them to let it go. I also love the fact that you offer a workbook with what you do, because I think I got to imagine the self-actualization that people go through. They get a chance to get new insights from you personally, and then going home and they're owning part of the work that they're doing, right? Not just Sean's going to fix me, sprinkle some magic dust on me when I come into his office. Right. But then they're also taking ownership for their own growth and self-actualization. There's something tangible about that homework, if you would, or the workbook, doing something on one's own rather than having it spoon-fed to them.
Well, and I'm sure in your work with your guys that you make it a important point that they do work in between the meetings and that they're taking action and they're being very active with the process. I love what you said. You really struck a chord with me, Doug, about the story. And one word came to my mind: resistance. Mm-hmm. Resistance to change. Gosh, for the last 5 to 10 years, first 5 years, I would really fail at helping people a lot of times because I didn't understand how insurmountable sometimes this resistance is with people wanting to change. There's a great quote: people yearn for change, but they cling to the status quo.
Yes,
right? They cling to that thing. It's safe and it's certain, and I know it. It's my damn blueprint. It's my story. Don't screw with it. And I got it. But you came in here. You wanted me to help you with your depression. You wanted me to help you with your anxiety or something. Or your relationships are the biggest. I mean, we could have like 5 podcasts on those. But yeah, you're so right. And God, I'd be really interested to find out how you work around the resistance. I certainly have my own tools with it. Yeah. But it's a real big challenge for sure.
Oh, it is. Yeah, we have a series of things that we've developed over the years. I think people get to know, and this goes right into suicidal thoughts. It's just a story, right? And so here's an exercise I'll have somebody do, Sean, is I'll go, you know what, write your story out, and I'll give them time. And I want you to flesh this story out. I expect you to have 2 to 3 pages minimum. And I want you to write it all out. So guys will sit there and they'll get their journals out or typing it. I like to have them write it, right? Just prefer writing versus typing. And they'll come back with 2-3 pages. Let's just call it 3. And they got their story. And man, I was wronged at this time. She or he did this to me. And there's all kinds of stuff in the story. And they're good. They're compelling. I mean, the stories are really good. And so then I say, what I want you to do now is grab a highlighter. And now I want you to highlight the undisputable facts that nobody can dispute within the story. And Sean, I'll tell you, I've done this hundreds of times with men and women, but men specifically. And they may have 5 or 6 sentences highlighted by the end of it. And you really break it down to this 3-page story they've been holding on to, right? So it could be, I spoke to Sean. Sean said, I am a coach. That's it. Everything else I made up. Sean didn't look interested in me when I was talking. He was, he didn't think I was good enough because I have books to shovel behind me or whatever else it is all fabricated. Now, here's the great news. So again, this is to somebody that might be going through a hopeless time. That's just a story. You get to rewrite it any way you want and start embodying that new story that you like and get rid of the old ones. So that could turn into, I was talking to Sean. He's an amazing cognitive behavioral therapist, one of the best in the world. And he took an hour out of his time, not only to help me, but to help all of our listeners and men across the world. Sean must think I'm brilliant, whatever. I could write that story any way I'd like to. And we just get the optics on the story itself. In other words, recognize, hey, this is the story I'm telling myself. This is what I'm making it mean. Now, is this serving me to my highest level or not? And if it's not, let's chuck the story.
Yeah, you're right in line with my training and the way I look at these things. Absolutely. That's brilliant. I also love the idea that you see that there's such a small portion of it that is literal, or as you said, I don't know exactly how you frame it, but based in fact. These are the actual facts. Mm-hmm. These are the things that actually there. A lot of it, the other parts are just colored within the story.
Yeah.
And that's what we tend to say to ourselves. And the other thing about stories too is they become conditioned.
Yeah.
So they become unintentionally or intentionally practiced. So, for example, we talked about my friend's brother unfortunately died. It could have been something that he was told by his father, or even overhearing his father about surgeons. For example, surgeons are special; they're important people, etc. And if you're a surgeon out there, by the way, I do believe you are. I don't want there might be a surgeon listening or something like that.
Sure.
Hey. But actually, my father was a surgeon. But so the thing is that these stories can be then processed from age 5, 6, 10, and then we put them on automatic repeat daily, etc. And then now we have decades of conditioning. So that's another thing that we should talk about a little bit, is that, with my clients that I've helped with suicidal problems, and I've had quite a few now over my history, is once we start to modify, as you call it, the software, as I call it, their beliefs, mm-hmm. or their thinking, once they start to develop new ones, we write them down, we put them in their phone, they'll dictate it on their voice memo, whatever they need to do, put it on their mirror, repeat that thing every single day for the next 30 days, bare minimum, right? Because we want to make sure that you're practicing these new ideas, because you've unintentionally practiced the crappy ideas.
Yep.
The bad story or the bad beliefs, the bad software, etc., for so many potentially months or years now. So we have to kind of overlearn in the opposite direction until it's there with us automatically.
Yep.
We want it to be there automatically. And once we've got that, then now it's part of your new programming, if you will. So,
yeah, I ran a course we call master classes. They're usually about 4 weeks for the men. We have hundreds of them now over these years, but one on unconscious commitments, with this idea that the results that you're getting, you're committed to, consciously or unconsciously. And one of the things I like about what you said, all we're doing is shining a light on the conscious. Are you making do you have intention with what you want and what you're doing? Or are you doing this unconsciously or unintentionally just because it's a behavior pattern, right, that you've developed over years? Because if it's a pattern, you're doing it consciously or unconsciously. And so you've kind of absorbed it, if you would. And then you get to reprogram that patterning, that learned behavior.
And in my line of work, it could be something as simple as we talked about depression. I didn't get the promotion and I'm worthless.
Yeah.
Okay. By the way, there's an underlying philosophy or core belief that your work is equal to your worth.
Yeah.
Do you hear that? And that will come into that person's schema, into their thinking in almost all affairs. So when they talk to their friend, hey, what is your job? What do you do? And stuff like that. What do you do? And they're, all right, he's here. That person's there. I'm using my hands up here to gesture that they're of a higher sort of status of that person. And I don't judge that person at all. I just know that person has that belief or that story, if you will, that they practiced unintentionally, usually for a long, long time. It's that's what they have with them right now. And they may want to know some of the advantages and disadvantages of holding on such to that core belief. It might be useful for them to modify it a little bit, like, hey, doing well at my job or getting this promotion is really important, but it's not the end all be all. to my happiness. I refuse to make it that way. Doesn't mean I won't work my ass off. It doesn't mean that I won't stay motivated. I will. But I refuse to make myself miserable and put myself on this endless treadmill, for it. Now practice that idea, 100 times over and over again. And usually they're ideas that don't just sound good, but they're ideas that are based in fact. They're believable, and that makes them a lot more useful to people.
Yeah, they have to be believable. Yeah. I do something similar, and I'm conscious of time as well. But all I do is I tell guys, hey, start stacking the evidence for this new belief. Just start stacking the evidence in your favor. So if you got fired from your job, as the example you used, and start stacking evidence that you aren't your work. Hey, you know what? My kid said I love you. I'm a good father too. Or hey, whatever. I fixed the sink. I actually happen to be handy. Make it as easy as possible to stack the evidence in the favor of whatever belief system you're trying to create. Because gosh, man, Sean, aren't we so good at stacking all the evidence against ourselves? I'm a bad lover, a bad husband, bad father, whatever that may be. It's so easy to think that way. And just that slight paradigm shift can send somebody with social anxiety to someone who all of a sudden becomes an extrovert, right? Almost.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. It's so easy to do that. It reminds me of my old mentor, Dr. Aldo Pucci. He once told me, about the only thing that comes easy to us as humans is trouble.
Yeah.
so this stuff takes some work. Good emotional and mental health takes work. It doesn't. If you want natural tendency of human beings, it's to do the things we talked about where it goes astray. We make our strong wants, we turn them into absolute needs. We feel hopeless oftentimes. We have to work against those things, against the current of that emotional current that we have. We have to kind of turn the oars around, turn the boat around, start rowing. And that takes, 5 or 10 minutes or whatever we have exercise regimens, right? We do that daily. We should be doing the same thing. I think it'd be useful to do that for a lot of us on a daily basis, to be able to focus on the things that are important to us, to be able to condition, our useful beliefs, our useful stories, and to do it on a day-to-day basis. No one programs us and then we're just, we're done like that. That doesn't happen. It's a work that we need to do, just like anything else.
Yeah. I'll leave one more comment out there just to piggyback on what you said. Like the men I work with, the first thing I have them do is share with me 5 wins every single day, just to get them starting to the neuroplasticity to start thinking about winning versus failing. And then we add on 5 things you love about yourself, 5 things you forgive about yourself, and start getting them into that routine of kind of reprogramming themselves. And as you know all too well, Sean, when someone starts focusing on wins, guess what happens? They start winning more, right? But all too often our society, we bond by complaining, right? Oh, geez, do you see the weather? Oh, that's a bonding thing. We have guys, you'll like this, that are in a challenge right now in our group that are trying to, it's complaint-free challenge, 21 consecutive days. In my experience, it takes the average person years, not because you complain once, you go back to day 0. It is a very difficult challenge. Someone wrote a book called The Complaint-Free World or Life, and so we just modified it off that. But again, the whole idea, all the guys, go in there, not all, but most of the guys are like, son of a gun, I didn't think I complained at all. I'm on day 1 still. And I've been through it. I get it. But you start recognizing things. And again, you get those optics on what's going on around you. I'm going to wrap this. Sean, first of all, thanks again for taking the time. I'd love to have you back on. There's so much that, we noticed this right away, but so much you and I can talk about and discuss. If men want to follow up, and I will put your website, I'll have the team put your website information in the show notes wherever they find this. But where can someone go to get that workbook that's coming out? Where are they going to find that? That's going to be on the website, Amazon?
Yeah, it'll be on the website. It's going to be on Amazon. Again, we're looking at mid to late March when it'll be published there. So you'll be able to get it there. And if you have any questions, you can also email me at Sean, and that's spelled SEAN, at coastalcbt.com. So if you want to email me regarding the workbook, I actually have it with me. It's done. I just need to get the thing published right now. We're at the 5-yard line. We're ready to punch it into the end zone.
I get it. Yeah.
There we go. Yeah. Oh, that's your workbook too?
Yeah. Well, it's a book I wrote a while ago. So I know how it is. That last, 10 yards, so to speak, is the toughest part.
Yeah. It's been a pleasure talking with you, Doug.
Likewise. Thanks so much for what you're doing out there. And thanks for coming on to help so many more men who are struggling, or at least bring this awareness to other men. And gentlemen, for those of you listening, as I always say, in the moment of insight, take massive action. Sean's given you loads of gold here. Go back through. We talked about hopelessness to hopefulness and what you can do there, transcending your identity. Sean's given you literally a playbook on how to make some of these behavioral changes coming through there. Make sure you grab his workbook and visit Sean's site. And I'll try to do my best to twist his arm and get him back here for you guys. So guys, as you know, I'm always in your corner. We'll see you next time on the TPM show.